Welcome everybody to Donington Park and the final event of the season for the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain. Two 25-minute races coming your way today in rather challenging conditions, but we've had some really entertaining racing in both the dry and the wet earlier on this season from this championship, so I'm sure the spectators here at Donington Park are going to be well entertained. The track temperature is fairly low, the humidity is very high, the wind though virtually non-existent, so I fear that this weather is possibly here to stay. Certainly not showing any signs of lifting is the cloud cover in the immediate future. Drivers out on the circuit though ahead of what will be 2 green flag laps. I think that's going to be the order of the day really for at least the first half of today's on-track action. Because of this change of conditions yesterday, when these drivers were last out on circuit for qualifying, it was bone dry, it was pretty sunny. All around, pretty nice day actually at Donington Park yesterday, but today they are definitely going to have a bit of a challenge on their hands. It's car number 1 that is on pole position, and car number 1 is being driven by James Dorlin. James Dorlin making a very welcome return to the championship. He is our reigning champion. He won this championship in 2020 and he's returning just for the final round. He's not scoring championship points here, he's just here for a bit of fun really, to boost the grid numbers a little bit, but James Dorlin, a real class act, a very quick driver, be that in Porsches or McLarens or Renault Clios. He's had success in all 3. Alongside him on that grid is going to be car number 89. Car number 89 there is Jack Bartholomew, and Jack Bartholomew is going to be keen to try and show that he can go up against the very best. The reigning champion, James Dorlin, is certainly going to have a fight on his hands, I think. There was only a 1/10 of a second, just under a 1/10 of a second actually, between them in qualifying yesterday. Again, that was in the dry. The conditions are very different today, but we'll wait and see whether Dorlin's experience in the car is maybe going to come good. He had a few wet races to contend with last year, including, I seem to recall, here at Donington Park. So, off onto their first of 2 green flag laps they go. Then the safety car is going to lead them around, and James Dorlin will have a bit of a look now at exactly what the conditions are like out there. There's not... Oh, blimey, James Dorlin. I was about to say there's not too much standing water, so the conditions are maybe improving. Not quite enough for James's liking, though. That was a big, big moment out of Redgate Corner. That would have been a tad embarrassing, wouldn't it? Returning with a big fanfare as the reigning champion and then spinning on the warm-up lap, but thankfully gathered it all together. These cars do have traction control, which can be adjusted, I believe, by the drivers, and therefore should be reasonably drivable even in the wet, but James Dorlin showing that it's still possible to get it wrong. Dorlin then will have the pole position. Jack Bartholomew, as I said, alongside him. Now, we don't have to worry too much about championship scores because the both championships, both the Pro and Am class championships, have already been wrapped up. Theo Edgerton took the championship for Total Control Racing last time out. He's also been named as a Porsche GB Junior driver finalist as well, so he'll take part in a shootout at Silverstone in November, competing for what is a really prestigious opportunity to get involved with Porsche for a long-term deal, and Theo Edgerton, we wish him the best of luck with that. He's not racing this weekend though, because he's already wrapped up the title. And then in the AM category, the same is true of Ian Humphries for Veluga, the team that's had so much success in this championship already in its brief history, and Ian Humphries secured the AM category championship. He's graduated up actually into the Porsche Carrera Cup Great Britain, moving on up the Porsche Motorsports GB pyramid, and made his debut in that championship here at Donington Park a week ago on the British Touring Car Package. So we wish him the best of luck as he moves up the Porsche racing ladder. So with those 2 out, we are very happy therefore that we've welcomed 3 new drivers this weekend. John White and Matt Carl Henney, as well as Harry Foster. So 3 brand new names to the championship. All of them, though, I think with the potential to be pretty quick. Matt Carl Henney has had success in the Porsche Club Great Britain Championship. In fact, he wrapped up his class championship only a week or so ago at Alton Park. And Harry Foster is the brother of Louis Foster, who's starting to build a bit of a successful single-seater racing career for himself. He's also the son of former British touring car racer Nick Foster, who himself was a Works BMW driver for a while, about 6 or 7 years or so ago. So the Foster family, a real racing family, and very happy to have Harry on board for this weekend. So the green flag lap, the second green flag lap underway, and that means we're moving closer and closer to the start of the race. Let's take a look then, shall we, at how they're going to line up for this one. On the front row, although it won't be quite that way, it's James Dorlin alongside Jack Bartholomew then, the two Redline Racing teammates at the front of the grid. Team Parker Racing synonymous with Porsches. They've got Matthew Armstrong third on the grid, ahead of Charles Clark for In2 Racing on that second row as well. Then it's Harry Foster, who's been slotted into the pro class, and you can see why, fifth fastest overall. And then Rob Boston alongside him, another name very well known to all fans of British motorsport. He's qualified well in sixth. Then we get into the AM class, so it's Alex Maliakin who's got the pole position in that category ahead of Carl Cavers alongside him. They're together on the fourth row, first and second within the AM class on the grid. Then Matt Kyle Henney, really solid qualifying effort that. He goes well in the wet too, does Matt. Third within the AMs ahead of Nigel Rice for Redline Racing. Then it is Pete Chambers and John White, another one of those new arrivals in the championship, lining up 12th. And at the back of the grid is Kurt Limer. He actually qualified ahead of John White, but has been moved to the back of the grid. So Kurt Limer, there you can see him. You're not going to miss him, really, are you, in that very distinctively liveried car. Number 88 start right at the tail end of the 13-car grid. Kurt Limer actually only just started racing, making his circuit racing debut this year, having previously competed in historic hill climbs over in Switzerland. So this is a little bit of a different challenge for Kurt, and he's going to be starting from the very tail end of the field. We'll watch with interest to see what sort of progress he might be able to make, particularly through the AM class. So then, the grid is set, the conditions are not changing at least, so that should be a fairly constant level of grip level for the drivers to deal with over what was going to be a 25-minute race. The race time started at the start of that second green flag lap though, so the race has officially started behind the safety car, and we'll go racing this time around, and it's James Dorlin who will lead the field away then, weaving around as he does, heading up towards the Connors hairpin, still really working those tyres hard. The ambient temperature being so low means that getting temperature into these tyres ain't the easiest thing to do. And James Dorlin not hanging around here, is he, as he comes out of the final corner to line up on the grid. So we are going to get a standing start then. It's going to be interesting to see who gets the traction off the line, isn't it? Not easy to do a standing start in these conditions. As I said, these cars do have traction control, but they'll want to turn that traction control down as low as they possibly can, because all it does really is interferes and robs them of power and acceleration. Of course, it means you can accelerate safely without spinning, but off the line in particular, they need a little bit of wheel spin to launch themselves towards Redgate Corner as quickly as possible. So we are about to go racing then. James Dorlin on the left, Jack Bartholomew on the right. Who gets into Redgate Corner first? Let's find out. The red lights go on, they go out now. We are away and racing, and Bartholomew is away really, really well. There's one car that's not moved at all, I'm afraid, mid-grid, but it's Bartholomew that gets the lead. Down towards Redgate Corner, Dorlin slots into second place, and then they're three wide behind. Dorlin to the inside, he's not slotting into second at all. He's going to go for the race lead through Redgate Corner, almost leans on his teammate. The two Redline teammates running side by side down through the Craner curves, and still neither one of them giving way. It's Dorlin though that fights back beautifully to get the lead down into the old hairpin. So Dorlin leads then, Bartholomew in second place. That's Charles Clark in third position ahead of Armstrong, with Harry Foster in fifth. Kurt Limer has already gained a couple of positions. He's now challenging Pete Chambers as they drop down the hill. So Kurt Limer, despite the fact he's very inexperienced at racing, is actually looking pretty quick in these wet conditions. So up through McLean's then. Bartholomew now actually under threat, isn't he, look, because we've had some changing behind. Charles Clark has dropped behind Armstrong again now, and he's actually losing out to Harry Foster too, so down to fifth for Clark, and into second goes Armstrong, and he levers aside Jack Bartholomew, who might now find himself falling out of the podium places because Harry Foster gets alongside him as well, and Charles Clark closing in too. So at least two positions lost there for Bartholomew, maybe a third, because Clark to the outside has a wheel on the grass, he's sideways and just about gathers it together, loses a lot of momentum through the chicane though, and so the number 77 car, unfortunately, is going to fall some way behind that group. Now he's still fifth position, but losing an awful lot of ground. Down through the Melbourne hairpin they go. It looks like Maliakin's still leading in the AM category. Limer did get past Pete Chambers, who's struggling a bit on the opening lap, and the car that didn't move off the line was Rob Boston. That's a shame. I was looking forward to seeing how Rob got on in what I believe is his first appearance in the championship, or maybe his second appearance in the championship, but sadly a non-starter essentially. So, entertaining stuff then. Dorlin leads the way. It's Matthew Armstrong in second. Third place, Harry Foster. That's the leading group. Then a gap back to the struggling Bartholomew, who after that really good start has not looked particularly comfortable throughout the rest of the first lap, falling down to fourth, and that could be fifth very shortly, look, because Charles Clark is looking to try and move alongside him, maybe down into the old hairpin. Charles Clark, you can barely see him through the murk, but he is tucked right up behind Bartholomew. Looking to try and get a good exit from the right-hander, which he does. There's a spin for number 17 at the top of the hill. That's John White. Not the best debut in the championship for him, but hopefully he should get going again after that rotation at the exit of Redgate Corner. Bartholomew then hanging on to fourth place by the skin of his teeth here. Charles Clark definitely looking the quicker of the two. Charles is another driver who's raced in Porsche Club GB. Made his championship debut at the end of last year, and he's just forced a mistake out of Jack Bartholomew, who runs wide through the gravel up at Coppice Corner. So Bartholomew then will lose a whole heap of places. In fact, he falls almost to the very back of the grid, behind not only all of the pros, but also behind the AM drivers as well. Let's see what happened then. Up into Coppice Corner, and Bartholomew just a bit of a wiggle midway through the turn, and just unfortunately couldn't make the corner. So Bartholomew then, I think, drops down into 10th place. I think Kurt Limer was the last driver to find a way past him. So that takes him well and truly out of contention. Still, though, these top three circulating very, very close together. Now, these are relatively long races. We lost, of course, the best part of 5 minutes because of the safety car start, as Limer dives up the inside now of Nigel Rice. Another place gain there for Kurt. He wasn't setting the world alight yesterday in qualifying, it must be said, but he's just taken fourth place in the AM class, so the wet conditions certainly playing into his hands. And there you can see Jack Bartholomew is the next car behind these two now, so Bartholomew is indeed in 10th position, but until he starts overtaking other pro class cars, he's not doing himself any good as far as the points are concerned. But yes, as I was saying, these are reasonably long races, 25 minutes, so tyre management and car setup, they all come into play. Important to try and have a car that works well through the second half of these races, especially in the wet, because what you really don't want is your wet tyres overheating or losing you grip towards the end. It's still fairly damp out there, so I don't think there's too much of a risk of that, as Kurt Limer sadly undoes all of his hard work with a very, very lurid spin going up through Starkeys. That is not a nice place to go off the road. Surprisingly easy to do so, though. At least he gives us an opportunity to enjoy that livery up close, but he's struggling a bit now to find purchase on the grass and get going again. So Kurt Limer off the road, falls to the back of the field. Rob Boston, by the way, has now started the race and is actually still on the lead lap. He's not even last either, because he's already passed the number 17 of John White. So Rob Boston is circulating in P12, some 29 seconds off the race lead after that really, really slow start. Battle here coming down through the Melbourne hairpin. That's the number 22 of Carl Cavers, who is dicing with Matt Kyle Henney. Matt Kyle Henney, the Class 2 champion in the Porsche Club GB Championship race this year, son of Peter Kyle Henney, who's raced Porsches for an awfully long time in Carrera Cup Great Britain. And Matt is a very promising young driver, and that is why, look at that for a move around the outside, going through the Goddard's hairpin. And that will put Matt into second place in class, I think, provided he gets the move done at Redgate, because, of course, he's now on the inside, which in the dry is the place to be. But in the wet, it's a bit slippery down there, and this might just give Cavers a chance to attack on the exit. It doesn't. Matt Cole-Henney manages to hold on to it and takes second in the class. Now, he's the best part of 4 seconds behind Alexei Maliakin, who is the class leader. But Matt Kyle-Henney for Into Racing might just have something here for the class leader. His last lap was slower than Maliakin, but of course he was battling away with Cavers. This lap time will be very, very interesting for Matt to see whether or not he's going to be able to bridge that gap. Still got 15.5 minutes to do so, of course. Fastest lap of the race, meanwhile, belongs to Matthew Armstrong in second place, 1 minute 46.587. On the previous lap, then, he was about a tenth quicker than the leader. And on this lap, in the first sector, half a tenth faster. The middle sector, 3/1000 slower. So they're pretty much matching each other, Dorlin and Armstrong, on this fourth lap of the race. They're 2.8 seconds then clear of Harry Foster. So Foster's dropped back in third position over the last lap or so. Not quite able to live with these two, but Harry, of course, making his debut in the championship. Armstrong and Dorlin very much not, so they're a bit better versed maybe with how these cars handle the wet conditions. Dorlin in particular always was very good at having a car that came on strongly in the second half of the race, so if Armstrong's going to get this done, he might have to get a move on, because we are now approaching half race distance. Across the start-finish line they go again. 4 laps in the book. Another fastest lap for Armstrong though, 46.4, and he got all of that time in the final sector. He was 4/10 faster than Dorlin through the chicane and then the 2 hairpins. So through the really tight corners, Armstrong's car working well. That tells me that he's got good traction in the wet. It's obviously a good setup on that car. And maybe he's able to run with a slightly lower traction control setting then, which would increase the risk of spinning the rear wheels, but it also increases your acceleration out of those slow corners. Through the high-speed stuff, look, Dorlin taking these wide, sweeping, wet weather lines, and he's managing to keep Armstrong at arm's length. If anything, he's pulling clear in the first part of the lap. Let's watch, though, to see whether Armstrong brings it down again in the final sector. Through McLean's, he tries to follow Dorlin now on the wide line through the right-hand corner. Runs a bit too wide though, and you can see the speed that lost him when he got out onto that painted surface on the outside edge of the curb. It spun up those rear wheels. You shouldn't really be out there anyway. You're technically exceeding track limits, but it's pretty self-policing really in these conditions, just because of how slippery that paint is. Right then, the gap in the first sector came down by just over half a tenth. The middle sector, though, because of that mistake, is 7/10 slower for Armstrong. So the gap, as you can see, is up to over a second again now. So Armstrong has it all to do once more. Windscreen wipers working away as he drops down into the hairpin at Melbourne corner. So Matthew Armstrong making his championship debut this year. His father, though, races in Carrera Cup with Team Parker Racing. So Armstrong, again, another family that sort of got in with Porsche quite a long time ago, and it does seem that drivers that start racing Porsches then keep on racing them, be they in this championship, which only made its debut, of course, at the start of last year, or moving up into Carrera Cup GB. There are plenty of other one-make Porsche championships in the UK as well at club level, things like the Porsche Club Great Britain Championship that I mentioned earlier on. It's Carl Henny and Charles Clark have had success in. So a very popular car, and we are hoping that we'll get even more of these Caymans out for next year. It's a championship that's got a lot of potential, that's for sure, and whenever we've seen it racing on the British GT package, it's always kept us nicely entertained. This battle, I think, is going to keep us entertained, at least for the time being, because we've got side-by-side here heading towards Redgate Corner, and on the inside line, that is Pete Chambers, and around the outside goes number 69, Rob Boston. So that is a pro driver ahead of an AM driver, but Rob Boston moving his way back through nicely after that really slow start. Oh, look at the pace that Chambers' car was drifting its way through Hollywood there at the top of the hill. That was really, really good stuff. Not very quick, but spectacular to watch. Pete Chambers then heading down through the old hairpin. There is Jack Bartholomew. So Bartholomew is now 7th. He got past Carl Cavers on the previous lap. He's now got Matt Kyle Henny ahead of him. Remember, I said I was going to watch the lap times of Matt Kyle Henny to see if he was going to catch Malley again. I then forgot to do that. I can tell you, though, the gap has gone up, not down. It was about 3.8 when Matt moved into this position. It's now 4.8, so he's not catching the class leader. And it wouldn't really serve him all that well to start defending from Bartholomew, because again, Bartholomew is a pro and therefore isn't scoring points in the same class. That was a spin for Carl Cavers, a spectacular one at that. So Carl Cavers off the road as Bartholomew makes it look very easy, going up the inside of Matt Carl Henny to take 6th place away. Cavers continues, but will have lost at least 1, maybe 2 or 3 positions, because Pete Chambers and Rob Boston weren't that far behind either. See at the end of the lap what position he's in. It does almost look now like there's more water on the circuit than there was earlier on. Is that what caught Cavers out? Couldn't see from there. He arrives already pointing the wrong way. Very lucky, actually, not to make the tyre wall there. I don't think I've ever seen anyone hit that tyre wall, actually, but he came very, very close to doing so. Luckily managed to pull the car up just in time. Not easy to do on the wet gravel and grass, of course. So out of Redgate Corner goes this... I was going to say battle for 6th place, but actually Bartholomew is comfortably ahead of Matt Carl Henny. This isn't all that comfortable, though, coming out of Redgate. This is Boston's charge continuing, because now he's managed to overtake Nigel Rice. So he is now into 8th position overall. Cavers did fall behind this pair. Boston's next pro rival is Bartholomew. So Bartholomew is about 11 seconds up the road from him. But on the previous lap, Boston did a 48.2, Bartholomew a 48.2 actually as well, so they're matching each other. So unlikely then that Boston's going to improve his class position unless there are dramas for those ahead. No dramas so far for this man though. James Dorlin, fastest lap last time around as well. You can see the effect that's had. He's pulled now a 2.6 second lead over Matthew Armstrong in second place. So 45.896 is now the benchmark for the others to chase after. Just to compare that to the dry pace from yesterday, about 12 seconds or so off the pace. 1:33.9 was the fastest lap in qualifying. So James Dorlin then, showing that he was the champion last year for a reason, charges down into Redgate corner. Matthew Armstrong now 3.5 seconds back. He definitely can't live with Dorlin's pace. But again, goes back to that point I made earlier on, that Dorlin always does seem strong in the second half of the race. So we saw this a lot, last year I should say, when he was fighting for the championship. Often spent the first half of the race defending from the lead, but then he did often seem to be able to pull a gap in the second half. Ooh, runs a little bit wide there over the curbs, but Dorlin has it all under control for now. Heads up towards Schwantz curve, still pushing. A little bit of a wiggle there as he clipped the curb through the left-hander, and then runs very wide over the curbs again out of McLean's. So James Dorlin, I guess nothing to lose really, no championship to worry about here. Just out to show that he's still the benchmark, he's still the fastest driver in one of these Caymans, and he always has been spectacular to watch as well. So as he heads into the chicane then, he continues to lead overall, leads within the pro class, the AM category, as you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, still being led by Alexei Maliakin, but now only 2.3 seconds ahead of Jack Bartholomew. So I think Bartholomew is probably going to take 5th place overall from him. Bartholomew, one of the fastest drivers on the track now, actually, a 47.6 last time around, was on pace, in fact quicker by almost a second than the 3rd and 4th place cars, Harry Foster and Charles Clark. So it's a shame that Bartholomew lost all of that ground earlier on. He may well have been able to challenge for a podium despite slipping backwards on the opening lap or so. Down through the Melbourne hairpin goes James Dorlin though, 4 seconds his advantage over Matthew Armstrong behind him. In fact, they've just gone through, I beg your pardon. This is Maliakin, his teammate. Very similarly liveried car, which caught me out, but it is Alexei Maliakin in 5th position. Overall, the car behind him is Jack Bartholomew, though, so Bartholomew is closing on that lap by another 7 tenths or so. So Bartholomew, by the end of the next lap, I think he's going to be right with Maliakin. There's Matt Carl-Henny, though. Very impressive debut in the championship, this for Matt. And turns his way through Redgate corner into racing, running Matt this weekend. And I think that this is definitely going to be a championship Matt is evaluating for next year. At this rate, he would definitely be a contender for the AM Class Championship, wouldn't he, if he stuck around in 2022, which I suspect he probably will do. As I said, his father has raced in Carrera Cup for a number of years, and Matt, I guess, will be looking to maybe copy that career path that his father, Peter, has made for himself. 2nd place here in the opening race of the weekend within his class would be a very, very good start to this final round of the season. Jack Bartholomew then, can he claim 5th place here from Alexei Maliakin? He's got 6 minutes to do it. He's in a different class anyway to Maliakin, so in a way you wouldn't expect the number 23 car to put up too much of a defence here. But then Alexei's had a pretty lonely race, hasn't he? He's been on his own, he's not really had anyone to fight with, so may choose to make life a bit more difficult for Bartholomew here. It's not like Jack is reeling him in by seconds a lap either, is he? 7 tenths quicker on the last lap is a decent advantage, but in the wet especially, that's not huge. And you need a bigger delta than that, really, for it to be, in quotes, an easy overtake. No such thing, really, but an easier overtake, maybe. Out of the hairpin. And on this lap, I think Maliakin's probably responded actually to the pace being shown. Yeah, he's only 4 tenths slower this time than Bartholomew, so Jack is now that he's in the spray, perhaps struggling to maintain that same level of speed. So, yeah, this overtake ain't going to be an easy one for Jack. Bartholomew, run by Redline Racing, of course. You may recognise him from the British GT field a number of years ago. In 2016, Jack raced an Aston Martin in the GT4 category. He's then gone on to have success in Lamborghini Super Trofeo, both in Europe and Asia, making his debut in this championship this year. Didn't race with us in 2020. But good to have Jack back on the British GT package for selected rounds this year. And, of course, the rounds at which the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain is not racing with British GT. They've been on the British Touring Car package, so really good exposure for the drivers as they look to try and further their careers, be that within GT racing or one-make Porsche racing itself. So Maliakin then now starting to feel the pressure maybe from Bartholomew. He's half a second behind him, out of the chicane, down into the Melbourne hairpin. You can see the spray that he's having to drive through. The rain has intensified a little bit over the last 5-10 minutes or so, and Bartholomew sees an opportunity here to try and get some clear air once again. He goes up the inside, and in the end, Maliakin didn't fight it too hard, and he even hits the brakes coming out of the Melbourne hairpin there to avoid ending up back alongside Bartholomew. So sensible driving back from Maliakin. He knew that wasn't really his fight, but Jack still had to work for it on the brakes, didn't he? And eventually move through. Now, that is the John White car, the Welshman, in the pit lane, and not going anywhere. Nothing obviously wrong with the car, but it's not that uncommon in conditions like these to see drivers actually struggling with visibility, not just because of the spray, but because maybe the windscreen starts misting up. You get even a drop of moisture in the car on a wet day like this, as I'm sure we've all experienced in our road cars. It's not pleasant, and you can end up really struggling to see, so you may have just pitted to wait for the windscreen to clear. He was running, I think, in last place anyway, and he's been in the pit lane now for almost a whole lap. James Dorlin is 5.2 seconds to the good now. He's going to be going on to his penultimate lap probably next time through. Yeah, it will be. 1 minute 46 is the lap times he's in at the moment. He makes his way then down into the Melbourne hairpin. You can see the really strange line they're taking into Melbourne. Again, just trying to stay off that racing line. There was actually oil dropped at this part of the circuit in a support race yesterday as well. I wonder if some of that's still lingering around now that it's wet. That's not going to be pleasant to drive on at all. And so a lot of the drivers I've noticed in all of the races today taking a very tight line into Melbourne to try and avoid running on that. Across the line he goes then, 2 minutes to go. Time for 2 more laps in this Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain race, the first of 2. They'll be back out again later on this afternoon at about 5:10. There you can see the gap between the top 2. That's what 6.7 seconds looks like, but then the gap back to Harry Foster in third is an even bigger one. Harry will break the timing line now, 12.6 seconds behind Matthew Armstrong in second place. He's only 1.7 ahead of Charles Clark, though. And Charles on the previous lap was 8/10 quicker than him. So is that a one-off slow lap for Foster, or is this the start of a trend? Is Clark going to be able to close in and challenge for that final step on the podium before the end of the race? We'll wait and see. 5th place is still Jack Bartholomew, having just set a personal best lap on the previous lap as well. Leaders, though, up at the top end of the circuit. There's Dorlin, and then he's got almost the length of that straight, hasn't he, between McLean's and Coppice, between himself and Armstrong in second. There is Matthew. Windscreen wiper's still going, despite the fact he's not actually running in the spray, so it clearly is still raining. It's that really fine, drizzly rain that soaks you right through that is falling today at Donington. It's just sort of lingering in the air. Very, very unpleasant conditions, but some drivers, of course, do enjoy driving in the wet more than the dry. The cars move around a lot more. It certainly rewards a smooth driving style, something that James Dorlin evidently has, because he has excelled in this race. In fact, he's just done a purple middle sector as well, so James Dorlin could be on to improve upon his previous fastest lap. The current benchmark set by James back on lap 6 is at 1:45.896. Is he going to beat it this time then? Comes out of the hairpin, up across the start-finish line. Is it a new fastest lap? No, it's not in the end. The final sector wasn't particularly rapid, so 46.2, about 4/10 in the end, 3.5 tenths off the previous fastest lap of the race. Armstrong doing 47.3s though, so over a second slower. There's Maliakin. Now, Malikin is soon going to have another of these pro drivers on his tail. Rob Boston, the number 69 car, closing in. So this is now becoming one of the tighter pairs of cars out on the track. But Malikin still leading the AM class, and he can afford to lose this place to Boston, and it wouldn't matter one bit. He's got about a 7 or 8 second lead over Matt Carl-Henny, who just did his personal best lap of the race a lap ago. And he's now lapping a little bit quicker than Malikin, so certainly Rob Boston is lapping quicker than him though. That gap is down to 1.8 seconds as they start the final lap. They're over half a lap though behind James Dorlin, who's already coming out of Coppice Corner and heading towards the final sector for the final time in what has been a brilliant return to the championship for the 2021 champion. And James Dorlin, who has happy memories of Donington Park from last year, about to add another one because he's now just 2 corners away from claiming a race victory here, the first of what he hopes will be 2 this weekend at Donington Park. Had to work hard for it in the early stages though, didn't he? Bartholomew and Armstrong, they were giving him a bit of hassle over the first lap or so, but once he broke away by a second or so from Armstrong, he didn't really seem to break the spirit of his pursuer. And James Dorlin has coasted home from then on in. He set the fastest lap as well. A perfect performance then on a perfect return to the championship for James Dorlin, who wins the opening race of the weekend for the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain. Second place will be Matthew Armstrong. A solid drive that from Matthew, and a pretty impressive performance all round to be within 10 seconds of the reigning champ and more than 10 seconds clear of the rest of the field. Now on the final lap, Rob Boston is on the inside of Alexei Malikin and does take 6th place. So Malikin, he's actually going to try and fight back as they head up the hill now. Dives back in line. He's not going to try and go up the inside, is he? Yes, he is. He is going to try and get this place back away from Rob Boston, who runs very, very wide, but he's looking instead for the better exit. So Malikin goes through, but watch out for the exit speed there from Rob Boston as he tries to get alongside at the line. Can't quite get there. So fighting stuff from our AM class winner there, Alexei Malikin. He would have won the class regardless of whether he got past Rob Boston at that last corner, but he did go back through and did therefore claim 6th place in the overall running order. And Rob Boston, after that slow start, ends up in 7th place. Dorlin then is the winner, Armstrong in 2nd place, and Harry Foster on the podium in his debut in the championship. Not bad going that, and he will be maybe hoping to go one better in this afternoon's 2nd race. If it's dry, we could see a slightly different running order, of course. Maybe those that struggled in the wet conditions, Jack Bartholomew springs to mind, might just be able to take the fight to James Dorlin later on. So let's hope the weather clears and we could have an even more competitive race. Still waiting for a couple of them to come home. This is the John White car that was in the pit lane for a lap or so earlier on, but it did actually carry on back into the race not long after. I am not convinced that Rob Boston saw the checkered flag, by the way, because as soon as they went into Redgate Corner on what should have been the in-lap, he was attacking Malikin again. He was tucked up so close behind Alexei that I don't think he had a chance of seeing the checkered flag through the spray. So Boston pushing hard here and might choose to go on for another lap. James Dorlin, though, he completed the 13 racing laps that we got in the end, 9.1 seconds quicker than Matthew Armstrong, so he takes the victory. Armstrong 2nd, Harry Foster in 3rd, and Charles Clark in 4th position. Bartholomew was 5th, and Alexei Malikin in 6th place is your AM class winner after a brilliant battle there with Rob Boston on the final lap. Boston comes home 7th, Matt Carl-Henny is 8th and 2nd in the AM category, ahead of Nigel Rice, who had a fairly quiet race to finish 3rd in the class. Carl Cavers was 10th, Kurt Leimer was 11th after the spin, but he was driving well before that. 12th place for Pete Chambers, and John White, as we've said, after a pit stop, finishes 1 lap down in 13th. So the Caymans will be back out again later on, as we've said, just after 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Wait to see whether the conditions are any different for that one. For the time being, it is a rather grim day here at Donington Park. An entertaining race, though, for the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain, which started with not actually a great start for the returning champion James Dorlin. He lost the lead to Matthew Armstrong going into the first corner, to Jack Bartholomew into the first corner. But Jack then started to struggle. He lost the lead going down through the Craner curves, then he lost control up at Coppice Corner. Kurt Leimer also losing control there with a spectacular spin going up through Schwann's curve. but James Dorlin was now starting to assert his authority at the front of the field. Matthew Armstrong was doing his best to give chase in the early stages, but through the middle part of the race, a succession of fastest laps for James Dorlin saw him pull the gap up to over 3 or 4 seconds, and from that point on, he escaped on up the road. It was a really strong debut in the championship for Matt Kyle Henney, who fought his way through into second place in the AM category after a good battle with Nigel Rice, and then pulled away from him to the tune of 10.3 seconds. Alexei Maliakin, though, came home the AM class winner in the end, whilst it was James Dorlin on his return to the championship who won the race overall by 9.1 seconds in the end over Matthew Armstrong second, and Harry Foster, who rounded out the podium.